Yeah, thank you for everybody who is here. And I want to start the panel with a question to the audience. It's like, who of you visited the metaverse? Okay. Who knows what the metaverse is? Okay. We will find out. We will find out there are many definitions. We have a lot of interesting speakers on the podium today to find out, okay, what is XR, VR, metaverse, how it is all together, and what kind of different perspectives are on this relatively new medium that was the last hype before AI, which is actually kind of good for people working in the XR space when the hype goes away and focuses on something else sometimes. But we will speak about this today with Sönke Kirchhoff from in VR space, Manuel Messer from the Amazing, what do you say, Amazing or Amazing GmbH, and with Haley Brady. Maybe if everybody introduces himself with like 1-2 sentences, what you do and what brings you in VR, XR, and what's your short perspective on the metaverse, and then we will discuss this. Ladies first then.
I can't tell if this is on. Is this on? Yeah. I think probably starting with a lawyer means that you guys are going to sound even more interesting. But I'm a partner at a law firm in London, Herbert Smith Freehills, and head the media and entertainment team there. So that's a pretty broad remit and probably slightly broader than what we're going to talk about today. But one thing that definitely has over the last few years gone through most of the work that I see, whether that's in the gaming space, in the gambling space, or live events, film and TV, is what we're talking about. So virtual reality, augmented reality, and then obviously, especially in the last year or so, the metaverse. So we can talk further around kind of the legal considerations there, and some of the things that we're looking at, and whether that's IP and how kind of brand licensing works when we've got all these different worlds, and also when we've got an overlay onto the physical world. So I'll stop there, given that you said to keep it brief for now.
Sönke Kirchhoff is my name. I'm CEO of InVR Space. We are Berlin-based, but we have a small branch in Hamburg and one in Munich. We are doing VR since more or less a decade in all fields. When we entered this niche, it was even more niche than it is today. So we didn't focus on specific genres or formats. We just wanted to explore that space and do from 360 videos. That's where we came from, to interactive games. We just released a dance game, for example, or we just got certified for it's for all ages. It's not even 6+, it's from 0 on, so everybody could play it, even if I think headsets are from 13+, that's what Oculus says. Anyway, we created a social XR platform, that's how we call it, in 2019, 2020. We had a lot of work with that when the pandemic started, called Meta Space. We've not been aware that the metaverse will be a topic when we did that, or that we'll get a topic. So yeah, we are in that field for quite a while, and doing from car configuration tools to documentaries from South Africa, everything a little bit. Yeah.
My name is Manuel Messner. I'm co-founder at Amazing, and we are specialized in augmented reality. So my background is actually e-commerce, and I know that e-commerce companies have 2 specific problems: conversion rate and product returns. Everybody knows it from pictures. You just cannot imagine how products look like in reality, right? And we are trying to solve that very specific problem with AR. So if you imagine you are visiting your favorite online shop, and instead of pictures, you can also place that product virtually in your home. And the cool thing is, you don't need to download any app, you don't need to download any software, you just use your smartphone and your web browser, and that's it, you're ready to go.
Yeah, so my first question, so just also to introduce myself, my name is Konrad Gill, I founded VRsys in 2017. And we are building actually VR use cases from within the metaverse. So we're working with a VR engine and a distributed VR engine called Neos VR, which is actually from the Czech Republic. and there we build like training softwares, from trainings to museums, everything that can be built in VR from inside VR. And yeah, it also took our community very by surprise when a bit more than a year ago, Facebook, or now Meta, announced that this is the new computing platform, and they are building the metaverse. And since we had a panel during the pandemic before that, so I wanted to ask you is like, how did your perspective on the metaverse, because I think all of us had a perspective of the metaverse before this, I don't want to say cataclysmic, but probably cataclysmic event of like the biggest social media company in the world betting everything on that. So like, how did that change your perspective and your business when suddenly everybody spoke about the metaverse and we were not like those crazy people with VR headsets who do something, but suddenly got the attention of media?
Is it for me?
For everybody.
Well, that's a funny question. And I mean, you mentioned earlier already in your introduction that sometimes it's nice when the hype goes away and you're a little bit you can start working below the radar, and it's not like everything's so much like everybody's focusing on your success or unsuccess. With the metaverse and Facebook changing the name to Meta, it was kind of the opposite. We've been below the radar with our platform. We just did what we did. We just supported conferences and festivals with a social VR platform that we could even offer on laptops and not only in VR. And suddenly Facebook changed their name and everybody was, oh guys, you've been lucky. You already been there 2 years ago. So you must earn millions now. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, it's a hype, right? So I don't even know if it's sustainable or not, or if it'll go away. And that was, I would say, 80% of the time I've been talking about our product was talking to people that were convinced that we got rich with this product, but they didn't even ask for if they could do something in there, because they didn't have any idea about what you can do in there. They just followed the hype or got interested in that hype that there is something available. And only perhaps 20% was like really like doing something in there and figuring out what it is about, because what it is about is something that we perhaps can look back on in 5 years, perhaps in 10 years, nobody knows, and then judge on, okay, that's now what we consider a metaverse. Then there is this, of course, there is the definition in the internet, like on Wikipedia or in the libraries, what the metaverse was supposed to be when it was, the term was set. But for me, it's still kind of unclear in a way, and I have my own imagination, and that's for sure a joint experience online from people in whatsoever avatars, photorealistic, non-photorealistic, whatever, that can do things jointly. If that's making a living, if it's like buying properties or gambling, I don't know. But I know it's about a multi-user experience online that allows you to do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do in an offline world.
Yeah, reflecting on that, I think the metaverse for me encompasses 3 varied technologies. First of all, immersive technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality. Second of all, Web3. And the other thing are virtual worlds where you don't even need VR or AR. And for me, the super exciting thing is here, I think for every company, whether it's gaming, casinos, there are use cases which make sense. And as the title of our panel says, we are now in the time where it's really the golden age is starting beyond the hype. And things which do make sense for companies are being built beyond the hype, beyond just being on the PR, for jumping on the PR train, for things which don't even make sense, which have been built. But yeah, very exciting time now.
I guess from my perspective, I mean, when I was a very junior lawyer, we had to have an avatar in Second Life, which some of you will remember. So we spent all this time thinking about the legal issues in Second Life. Second Life, I don't really know where it is today, but it didn't quite get to the hype that it maybe had at the time. And then obviously we've got the metaverse. So
It's still there, by the way.
it's still there. Okay, so some people are still. Maybe
think
my
it's-
avatar is still there.
Probably.
But the things that the people are doing there is no lawyers wanted.
No, it sounds dodgy. Maybe it's good I don't have my avatar there. But yeah, I guess the legal issues, to be honest, that we would have talked about with Second Life are not hugely different to what we're talking about when we look at the metaverse. I guess the difference is the metaverse is probably more of a hype and more well-known than Second Life, and then other technologies, as you say, have come along a lot further than the days when I had an avatar in Second Life. So I think actually from a purely what are some of the issues that regulators are looking at, and also actually some of the legal issues in the metaverse are the same concepts that we've had for years and years. So yeah, a slightly different view probably than you guys.
And because you said that for you 3 technologies are in there, what do you mean with Web3? Because there's also like a term like the metaverse where everybody understands because there are crypto people who say that there is no Web3 without crypto. Is it decentralization? Is it spatial web? What is Web3 for you?
Yeah, I mean, many people say the next iteration of the internet, kind of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. In my opinion, the most important thing of Web 3 is digital ownership. So you don't need to own real goods anymore, but you can, for example, own virtual fashion, which is based on the blockchain, aka NFTs. So I think this is the core element alongside with decentralization, right?
But do you think that the metaverse is like everyone has to have this ownership? Because there's a big debate within the metaverse community, let's say like this. It's like if this digital ownership makes sense or not. I mean, it's like this is a very systemic discussion. Yeah, one could say capitalism versus communism discussion. You can make all different slur words for the other side. But do you think that's an integral part and it needs to be in every metaverse, or there will be some islands of like metaverses where that doesn't matter, where people are sharing and creating and nobody cares if somebody uses stuff that they created? Or how do you see that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting approach and discussion. I think it does make a lot of sense for the new generation Alpha or whatever you want to call them. They are spending more money on Fortnite buying virtual heads for their avatars than they do in real life. So this is a substantial shift which very often we can't even make sense of, because why should you buy a virtual asset? What can you do with it, right? These questions pop into our head. But for them, the digital identity gets so important. You see that already on TikTok, on Instagram, that this makes perfect sense, that you buy virtual Gucci shoes or whatsoever. And that's why also the fashion brands are jumping on the train very heavily. And those have been one of the first ones who are on this, virtual asset train, kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you just raised it, so it triggered something for me. I mean, of course, in a capitalistic sense, right? I mean, if you would ask someone sub-Sahara, they wouldn't even be able to answer that question, right? I mean, for a Western European or like a European or a US American perspective, UK, whatever, like in a capitalistic world, it makes sense. You can purchase stuff that you wouldn't be able to purchase. You can, and we can go far deeper into what's possible there. But for like people working in India, in I said like sub-Sahara, they don't care. I mean, that doesn't add anything to their daily life or doesn't bring them water on the table. So, and that's like I think the basic things that we as human beings need, like food and stuff. That's something I still miss the answer from the metaverse. What's supplied in these terms there? It's only for purchasing things that are virtually, digitally there, perhaps. And if someone pulls a plug,
Yeah, that's
It's
cool.
getting dark, right?
Cool. Now, one of the like a question for the audience and maybe also for you, who owns land in the metaverse or in a metaverse? So nobody played the land ownership game. Okay, then we can speak openly.
I could sell you some land afterwards outside.
No, because I'm asking that because what you said in your first statement was also very much my perspective. We even got, like, in the Austria's biggest newspaper, an article, the big money is floating into the metaverse. Mm-hmm. And then they made an interview with me, and then they asked me, it's like, no, it's not the big money, we're doing the same stuff like before. It's like not that, but these numbers of, like, virtual land sales being more expensive than real apartments, this kind of hype. Do you think that this is gone completely now? It's like because, like, this all crashed down and so on, or is there some long-term value that some of that may come back or something?
I've been in the last week. We had a strategic discussion. That's how they called it on standards for the metaverse in the Ministry of Digitalization and Traffic. That's what's combined in Germany: traffic and digitalization. Yeah. So we had this meeting there and discussed the metaverse. That was pretty interesting because there was a lot of different opinions and whatever. But what I've taken out of it, while being a little bit like disappointed of, okay, there is not even a definition of that we're talking about, and then you are leaving the room after 2 hours and you have the feeling like, okay, what did we talk about? The biggest outtake was, or the biggest impact was in the end, to see that there have been companies like Lufthansa, for example, that changed their business model of training staff in an airplane, flying people from all over the world to their testing facilities to train security stuff, for example. They do it now virtually. They define this as the metaverse for them. That's totally fine for me. I would give a different definition. But the good thing is they are saving carbon footprints and training people now wherever they are in a VR headset, and they have a training afterwards. And the same applied for Siemens that has been there. So different big companies have been there and telling the story about they saved a lot of carbon dioxide, but as well like money. Of course, for them the money was much more interesting, but the carbon dioxide much more important to talk about by using these technologies. And that's a very good aspect, right? I mean, there's opportunities in there, and that's something that we have to dig into, not follow the hype and the word of the metaverse, but figure out what's the impact, what's the positive output of that, and there's a lot. That's what I see. Right?
And yeah, one of the big things for me in the metaverse is like that it actually brings people together in like really a social sense. So if the word social media wouldn't be occupied by what we understand as social media, I would give the definition social media to the metaverse, because you like have direct social interactions. When you're writing on a Facebook thread or Instagram thread or in some news group or something, you're disconnected with the person that you're talking to, because you're in a different situation. You're sitting in the car, in the train, the other one is laying in the bathroom, whatever. And so you're exchanging sentences, and it's not like really social. Whereas in the metaverse, your actions have direct reactions. So because you said that in second lifetimes you had avatars in order to explore that. So what kind of legal fields do you see there in the metaverse? Is it this human interaction and everything that can go wrong with a human interaction, like threats, or
I mean, I think there's a whole range, right? And you know, the biggest, one massive issue with the metaverse, and it was the same with Second Life, is what jurisdiction is there? I mean, you talked about speaking to the Minister of Digitalization and Transport in Germany, right? That's obviously Germany, but actually the metaverse, who does govern that? And in the real world, obviously, if something happened here today, you know, we're in the Czech Republic, we have a clearer jurisdiction. That's a big issue, and it's hard to kind of really get further into the legal issues without sort of starting with that. But yeah, to your point, yeah, harassment, all of those sorts of things. I mean, what is interesting is across Europe, we've obviously seen an increasing amount of regulation on online harms or kind of online safety. So the Digital Services Act that's come in across Europe, and in the UK we have an equivalent thing. That hasn't really looked at the metaverse. It is focused much more on the traditional social media platforms and any sort of user-generated content. But you could imagine, and some of that will be applied to the metaverse as well, because if there's harassment, if there's abusive behaviour, you're still looking at the same laws that apply in the normal world. So all of that, there's then all kind of IP infringement, all of that sort of stuff. If you buy a property there and then there's a dispute about the land, that there are issues there. I think what is hard is to know, to then look down and think, well, what law actually governs that? So it's complex, but yeah, a whole range.
And because you said like which jurisdiction, and here I want to put the bridge to the gambling or to the gaming, because from there it's like, okay, where the servers are, at the end of the day, that's the restriction that regulation that kicks in. Yeah? And so one big issue there is like with this big approach of metaverse of Facebook, for example, is because it's running on central servers over there. So technically, the law of the United States kicks in for everybody who's there. And so that means these metaverses have to be policed somehow. And the other possibility is to make this on decentralized servers. So like when you have like your VR space server, you throw a party that runs on your servers in Germany, and something goes wrong, it's you. Like you own a club, like you own a discotheque or something like this.
I never had the case, but I think so.
How do you see this? How that can be policed in a normal manner? For example, for harassment, because like the Facebook approach is okay. Like we listen 20 minutes of every of your conversations, and of course after 20 minutes we delete it. People will have trust issues with that, and so it's like, how do you think something like this can be policed? Because like people from everywhere can like hop in a room and do stuff together. That can be legal, fun, everything good, but it can be also illegal. So what do you think can be a good approach of like policing that?
I think it's difficult. I think looking at what we are seeing and will see more of in terms of the social media platforms, so like TikTok, Meta's products, so Instagram, etc., we will see them increasingly have to do more monitoring than they have had to do. And those platforms take more liability than they have done. So I think it has to be a similar thing to that. It is just, it's not easy because there are some laws that, to be honest, aren't necessarily just about where servers are, they're about where targeting is happening, etc. So yeah, if I had the answer, I'd probably be way richer than I am today. But yeah, it's complex, and to the extent that more and more things happen in the metaverse, I'm personally a little bit dubious about some bits of it totally taking off. I think it's useful for training and marketing, but I think if we see that take off more and more, then regulators will get more interested, as we've obviously seen with social media. But generally, the law is behind. So in the meantime, you have terms of use and that kind of stuff. But there's definitely no clear answer today.
And so basically we are at the same, legally at the same spot like we were with Second Life.
Yeah, I don't think we're that much further, no.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no regulator for the metaverse or anything.
Isn't it kind of like the nature of things that, of course, I mean, it's so new, there's so many aspects that people don't even know that they don't know about, that this needs to be like figured out, which always brings a danger that some things go wrong in the beginning that have to be maintained up. Like, I know VR chat, for example, they in the beginning there was a lot of harassment happening there, and then they introduced this button where you can push the button and then everybody else is grayed out, like you just see gray avatars and they can't talk to you anymore. But I mean, this is just a functionality that after something happened you can push the button. You wouldn't push the button before something happens. You will not see, like in a normal world, sometimes you don't see the attacker as well previously, but if you do so, you wouldn't have a button to stop that person. Here you have a button to react, but then you're excluding yourself, not the person who's harassing you, right? So, but these kind of functionalities, had to be figured out first before they could be implemented, because, I mean, for this kind of things, people could have been aware, VRChat could have been aware that this is happening, so they could have implemented it beforehand. But what I want to say is, like, there's so many aspects that we don't even know that they will happen or that they could happen, that they could only be laws against it or how to deal with that once it happened. And Facebook came from being, or it's a company, a privately owned company. And normally, of course, on the ground in the office of a privately owned company, you can do whatever you want as long as they allow it to you and as long as it's not murder, right? I mean, it's not a capital crime, right? So, and that's something that changed perhaps, and not fast enough, or the mindsets of governments couldn't follow fast enough, that there needs to be things implemented, and it's not a private room anymore, but something that's called a social network with millions and billions of people in there.
Yeah, it's pretty much like the real world in the end of the day. So
yeah.
It's like when you own that's what I wanted to say, was like when you own the club and you open a server, it's your responsibility what's happened there. That's it.
But the difference, for example, I mean, you said you had a Second Life avatar, you just left it behind. There is an unoccupied avatar in Second Life. If you leave behind your kid somewhere in the forest, someone will sue you for that. If you leave behind your avatar, nobody cares. I mean, that's just one simple example here right now about, like, there's so many things that have to be treated differently than in real life.
Yeah.
And you have to figure it out before you can figure it out, right? Millions of unoccupied avatars, I'm just thinking about it.
And since a big part of the audience is from the, I know not all of us are like coming from the gaming industry, so but let's just the perspective from the VR industry on the gaming industry. Where do you see applications of the metaverse and metaverse technology for the gaming industry? So.
Yeah, so VR, I would say, bringing gaming, what is now done on the PC, on the desktop, in a three-dimensional world, would be a very good application. So instead of seeing this roulette table just spinning on my laptop, I could literally stand in front of that and experience it in a totally different and new way. AR, I think, will come in our daily life, right? This is something sooner or later, I'm sure it will replace the smartphone and enhance our basically viewpoint. And nowadays you can already work with mobile AR, and for example, in a casino, you could go through, you could scan a roulette table and see more information what's going on right now with your smartphone with AR applications.
Any more ideas for the gaming industry here?
Well, it's broad. I mean, a multiplayer was always something that was super of interest, right? I mean, I remember like as soon as the internet was there were multiplayer games dealing with the internet. So I think that's where it goes, and that's like. Didn't you already mention Fortnite, for example? So we see what kind of potential is in there, and that people are appreciating it. In a way, I think it still depends on how much is the internet available all over the planet, and how accessible it is, and if everybody could join sooner or later. If it's just like a market for like Europe and UK and US and Canada and China, it might be different than if the satellites of Starlink, for example, are circulating much more over our African continent, for example, or India. It's billions of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so from what I have seen, as we are building like the metaverse from inside, and communities start not one, because there is several communities finding their interest and then finding together. I find it very interesting how people like interact when they meet for the first time in a space, but they have a shared interest, which is a bit like in the forums and news groups, but you can directly interact and then build something. And something that that we figured there are already not money gambling, because they don't really figure it out how that can be legal, and maybe we will put that two things together one day. But what we figured is like, because the normal evolution of gaming is like, okay, there were the casinos, there were the arcades, then there was online gaming, and now comes the metaverse, so which is like the next step of online gaming. But I think it's different, because the metaverse is more like the real life than online gaming. Online gaming is pretty much about affiliates, how much you present, how much bonuses you give, about your marketing, about your customer service, written customer service. Whereas base reality casinos are about, okay, location, where is it? This you don't have, except if you're doing it in a metaverse with land ownership. Then you have the location point, otherwise you don't have the location point in the metaverse. But it's more about like atmosphere, the social, is the staff nice, and so on. And there are several metaverse casinos which are operated completely without money, just for the fun. And there you see that it goes back to the old land-based gaming methodology of like what works. And I find that very interesting, and I want to close with the panel, maybe with the thought, and maybe with your opinions about that thought. If the metaverse doesn't make us more social again and bringing us back to how base reality life was before mobile phones, because the same things become important again, like personal contact, atmosphere, and things like this, and that the pure online screen part was basically just an episode of computing where we stuck away from the way how we do things as humans, did it in a different way, but with the metaverse we're somehow coming back to the roots. It's a provocative thought in connection with gambling, but yeah, what's your opinion about that?
Well, I agree. I can't say much more. I think the VR, AR will be the next generation of our laptops, our smartphones, and we are already doing meetings with our VR classes because we are all remote at our company, and it just feels much better. You can draw on a board, you can brainstorm much better, and I think this will help feel people more. And of course, it's very important that people are aware that this kind of reality won't exchange our real life, going to a bar, having a drink, but it shall enhance how we do what we are doing today anyway on our laptop.
Maybe I'm still speaking bits on this slightly, but yeah, look, I think there's great things that VR can do and AR can do. Do I think that the metaverse is a sort of, you didn't say replacement, but a kind of another way of going back to being in person as humans? I'm not sure. I think there's great things it can do. But yeah, I think I probably still need to be a bit convinced on that.
Well, looking back on how long the internet is established, I mean, we still, like in Germany, some people still say like, ich gehe dann mal ins Internet. Like they are going online, while we are normally...
With German internet speeds, I can understand
wow, okay.
that.
Yeah. So it's like, or like, I think it's getting more and more something that is just there, like everything, like air that you breathe. The internet is just something around, while for people who didn't grow up and lived most of their life with the internet, that's still something where you dial in, like by head. They are not dialing in anymore, but you know what I want to say, right? It's like something where you go into to do something, and that's the same with the metaverse. I mean, the iPhone is, how old is the iPhone? 15 years when the first release was there? And we are all waiting right now, at this moment, we are waiting for Apple to announce their VR headset. And I think if it's what we all hope that it'll be a game changer, and the smartphone will slightly disappear after 15 to perhaps then 20 years to something where we have a fancy glass. Those who already wear glasses are lucky, we don't have to change anything, but there's some additional information on the glass. So what we are talking about right now, that's what I want to say, like VR headsets will not be like that anymore in 5 years or 10 years. As the mobile phone, the cell phone changed to something totally standard in our pockets, being full of apps, with like, we can do much more things than 15 years ago. That's what I want to say. And that's the same with metaverse. I think it'll be all around us until we don't even feel it anymore as something special, something new. It'll be just something that we use on a daily life, as we use Google nowadays for figuring things out. the future is bright in these terms.
Let's see. Are there any questions to one of the participants from here? If not, then I would give to Zoltan. There was a question.
Yeah, just tipping off what you said, the last point about the metaverse. Thank you. Do you have any examples of real-life utility of the metaverse today? Yeah.
For me, well, it's again like the question of what is a metaverse. I don't have any good working and established example of something where you can walk around in your daily life using the metaverse as something that you don't access on purpose, where it's just there. No, not there. I don't know, at least.
My example would be our company, for example. We were basically operating completely inside the metaverse, like we are scattered around the world. But yeah, as you say, it's not like that they can be here now with us, because for this we would have to do some technical tricks to stream it in there and then stream the avatars out here. But yeah, we built several use cases inside the metaverse from train trainings. Also with the Austrian Railway, they are very leading in that. They're using it for training software, but built within the metaverse. So a bit different than like building a training application and then that's a VR application, but that's like you can add things on the fly. You build the training while you're doing it. To museums, I would say that also Fortnite is a working example of a metaverse because kids are communicating like that. And one interesting thing from the railways is because you said Fortnite, we built training software for the Austrian Railways, meant to be played in VR, also to be done in VR, so like train technical service and stuff. But in fact, they're using it in the train education, but in a desktop mode of the multiplayer. Because the 16, 17-year-old kids, when you give them a remote training via Teams, forget it. It's like 18 pictures next to each other, heads, no. But they are used to communicate with a lot of people at the same time because of playing Fortnite. But moving in the room. And it was a total game changer for them in the what's his Lehrling? Apprentice training. To do that in that environment, because there they were used to like communicate remotely, so they can do remote trainings now, which before, do a remote technical training via Teams with a 17-year-old, very difficult. But in that environment, because they are used to it, so I would say yes, even Fortnite is an example of a metaverse that does something, because it brings them to communicate and move in a field, in a virtual area. Yeah. Also, I think that there are enough working examples of the metaverse that give real value. Somebody want?
If there aren't any more questions, then would you like also to answer this, or no? All right, so I would like to add that augmented reality is very much used in sports, because there are a lot of augmented reality applications such as Ruvi, which is done here in the Czech Republic, which I use for training, but also augmented reality sports glasses, because I bought one and I started using them, and now if I don't have it on me, it's very weird that I don't have it, because it shows you all the data in front of you. You don't have to look at your watch for your pulse or your speed or pace or stuff like that. So that could be used, and it's very, very popular right now. All right, so thank you guys for the virtual reality session, and now we move back to compliance.